Well, good morning, everyone. How you guys doing today? That's fantastic. Well, in the next 12 minutes or so, I will address two questions with you based on the safety net reach of, in the context of American society. First, as we think about how we might define what the safety net is comprised of, our work focused on 4 types of insurance programs in the nation. The public health insurance, the earned tax credit, EITC, food stamps, and cash assistance. And what we will be doing is actually talking about, as I said, 2 issues. First of all, we're going to focus on what does the population-based data tell us about gender and the safety net? How wide is the divide between men and women, and what does it mean? And then secondly, we will move to a brief discussion about the devil being in the details, the notion of the kin quagmire and caretaker families. So let's start out by asking the question, what might we expect to already know about gender disparities with respect to the safety net reach? Well, of course, we might expect that because women, as we heard from the last presentation, are likely to be experience greater poverty than men, that their incomes, for example, will be much lower than that of males. We might also expect that because poor women are often single parents, that that would be another reason why poverty and their use of the safety net programs might be more in play. We might also know that poor women's social networks may facilitate their use of these particular safety net programs. So the approach that we're using on the data part of this presentation is that we're relying on the following sources of data. The head of household reports of safety net use in the 2017 annual social and economic supplement to the CPS. The receipt refers, when we talk about that, refers to the 2016 calendar year. We'll be looking at data on EITC, SNAP, TANF receipt, and the dollar amount specifically, the receipt of public insurance health, and the universe that we're talking about is restricted to heads of household living below the official poverty threshold. So let's start out with our first question. What do the differences look like with respect to gender and the U.S. safety net reach? Well, as this figure shows, and it shows that really the data on poor households reporting receipt of public health insurance, EITC, food stamps, and cash assistance in 2016. And we have data here for families overall, and it's also listed by family type. Men in poor households are less likely, that is 58%, than such women, that would be 73%, to report receipt of public health insurance. That should probably be no surprise. There are similar gender differences in food stamp receipt. Nearly half of poor women received Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, benefits in 2016, while just a third of poor men did. Among those households that did receive SNAP benefits, men and women reported roughly equivalent annual benefit amounts. In contrast, although women and men received EITC at similar rates, the median annual benefit for women is somewhat greater, $3,150, as compared to men, which is $2,400. So, oops. I'll move back instead of forward. So here we go. So for those of you who would like to see numbers, this is what we're really talking about in terms of dollars amounts. And as you can see, we have certain overall patterns that present themselves, but also patterns that are relative with respect to the issues of family structure. And especially with family structure, we see, for example, EITC, that they're exactly the same amounts that mothers and fathers actually experience. Even given that, what we still know is that men are far less likely to receive safety net benefits. And one of the major things that is responsible for this in terms of family structure has not so much to do with the issue of being single without children, but it's the single moms that are pulling this disparity down with respect to men being involved or being able to receive these kinds of safety net benefits. So what else do we know? We know that ethnographic research that also suggests that one of the many of the reasons we may find disparities between men and women with respect to this is that they don't have the same networks to be able to connect with, to find out information about these kinds of programs. Men's safety net use is also often more stigmatized. Men sometimes forgo benefits so as not to reduce the mother's safety net receipts. So, for example, if you have a situation where the father's taking care of the children and the mom may be drug addicted, he may be less likely to apply for those particular benefits because he doesn't want the mom to lose those benefits while she's going through her trying times. The incarceration factor also plays a big role in this in terms of men's access to resources. But the other thing that I'd like us to pay just a little bit more attention to is the notion of context will have its say. Can I get an amen on that? Indeed, context will have its say. I'm an ethnographer, so I couldn't leave the stage without talking a little bit about how that plays into all of this. Essentially, while we have the opportunity to look at numbers and dollar amounts, it's all relative in the context of actually looking at what goes on in families on a day-to-day basis. I'm happy to say all of the issues that my esteemed colleagues are talking about individually in their presentations, as an ethnographer, I see it in full force in each family that I work with. So all of those things I see come together at one time, and how it makes a difference in the opportunities that these families have, especially with respect to social mobility and whether or not the safety net is making a difference in those particular situations. Family, sisters and brothers, let me tell you, I am very, very worried. As I spend my time out in the field working with families who are trying to put together resources with the safety net programs, I am concerned at what is happening to them in current times. And it is different. I've been doing this kind of work for 30 years. What I see is a major compression with respect to families, where the generations are sort of folding down on top of each other and elongating. So there's more people per generation that the safety net has to address. And not everyone in these horizontal lines or these horizontal strata have the same access to the safety nets. So you see 1, 2, or 3 people in these families that have access, and they have to share it with a whole bunch of people. And in addition to that, they're not particularly happy about that. We have these ideas, we have these romantic ideas about kin, and it's like they're saying, come one, come all. We'll help you. Well, families are stretched way too thin. And in that stretch, you see emotional turmoil, and you see this collective constraint that takes those dollars amounts we have that we talked about and really kind of moves them to zero. 2 of the things among many that I see that we've talked about already are issues of suicide and injury, especially for young men and boys. And what that means relative also to incarceration rates and incarceration experiences, which makes them oftentimes ineligible for all kinds of safety net types of programs. I see utter chaos in homes as these complicated relationships people have developed with respect to romance and having children allows these families to shift back and forth between multiple households, never being able to anchor themselves in one place so that they could even be eligible to apply for these kinds of safety net programs. In addition to that, as an ethnographer and building on the notion that context matters, local rules and Jesus matters a lot in whether or not you actually get some kinds of support in some of the environments, especially rural environments. There are street-level bureaucrats that make decisions all the time based on morality and just whether or not they like you or not. If this man is gonna get resources or if this woman is gonna get resources. So that also comes into play. In addition to that, the other thing that we've seen, I've talked about the younger generations, and in these more compressed generations, I do see a higher rate of cancer. I mean, cancer in some of these families, I could equate to catching the flu or getting a cold because it's so common among 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds, where they're losing that generation in particular. But if we look at the older people, those who survive, those who make it to their 70s and 80s, what we then see is a caregiver or caretaker structure where these individuals are providing the safety net for these horizontal families based on their Social Security. And they don't have access to other kinds of safety net situations. So let me end with these key takeaway points. And these are things that we already know. Because women have primary responsibility for the care of children, women use social safety net programs more often than men. So we know that. Gender differences in safety net use cannot be fully explained by gender differences only in family type. We know that there's obstacles, and some of them I have mentioned to you in terms of the notion that context matters. So we know that there are obstacles that men face as single fathers compared to single mothers, making women or mothers more likely to actually receive cash and food assistance. Now, although some of these gender differences are rooted in differences in eligibility and could thus be straightforwardly addressed, others rest on gender norms and other cultural differences that especially stigmatize safety net use among men. The last part I want to say is, as we continue to move on in this conference, make sure, as you think about all this wonderful information we're hearing, that we keep it relative. and that we always understand that context will always have its say. Thank you.